this movie, um, there are things in the movie that were changed to make it more dramatic. The love story element, the rush at the end, those things were they massaged the truth. However, did you feel that it was a accurate depiction of your father in terms of his personality and how he uh, and his experience with Eichmann in Argentina?
I really, um, you're right. It was a bit, you know, Hollywood played a role here. Like the one thing that bothered me was the beginning where they show the
Killing the raw Nazi, but not my father. No, but I will tell you a true story is the guy who plays Moshe. In real life, that character was well, was a sociopath or psychopath, but they were watching Eichmann's family for years, and he had a plan to seduce Eichmann's wife and then take her out on the lake, um, where they near her house and murder her and her children. And they didn't let him do it, but that was a real plan.
so I'll say in a second what I feel about it, but in general, so there were a few things that I didn't love. The son of Peter, um, like there was one point in the beginning of the movie where he said like, "Let's just kill him. Why do it all?" My father would never say something like that either. As a matter of fact, my father didn't know how to use a gun. Um, he always said, his brain is his weapon. Uh, that said, I think that the narrative is well. One more thing, Oscar Isaac looks
Much
much
better
better
than
than
my
my
father.
father.
As a side note. But I actually met his father, and he had a great personality. Yes, it's not as good looking, but less hair.
Yeah. But the narrative, the stories, the DNA of the story, I think is telling the story the right way, and so I feel that yeah, I feel good about it. Despite the the extra cover and yeah, little details.
And Jordana, I thought it would be really important for you to share with this audience the context of how Holocaust survivors in Israel was a very different experience and than in the other places in the world. And uh, Israel, as this new country, uh, tried to put forward a narrative of heroes and martyrs rather than victims. And in fact, Yad Vashem is the heroes and martyrs memorial. So tell us a little bit about Holocaust survivors in Israel and the importance of the Eichmann trial to that.
So, just a personal story that's related to this. A few years ago, after my grandmother passed away, I was going through my grandfather's old office and I found a stack of papers from the early 1960s, 1961, 1962, about Eichmann's capture and trial. And these were all Israeli newspapers, Haaretz, and other publications that don't exist anymore. And my grandfather did not have hoarding tendencies, but he had kept these copies. And he was someone who got to Israel in 1946 after surviving the Holocaust. And I think for him to hold on to something like this spoke to this societal remembrance and identity. You were looking at a country where there was a huge population that had had this shared experience. And it was known, it was there. You see early on a scene of a tattoo of a waiter in a coffee shop. That's what Israel was. And so I think to have that heaviness being weighed down constantly and this feeling that they were able to do what could not have been done. if a country had existed, I mean, the character of Eichmann says it in the movie, no countries are taking Jewish immigrants. And so I think there was this added burden or responsibility of creating something that could maybe ensure a Jewish identity. And that is sort of the feeling that you would have had in Israel at the time. This was a major pivotal moment in so much more of the historical context. As you saw at the end, this was the first time that a criminal trial was televised globally. Full stop. Not an Israeli criminal trial, but a criminal trial. And so you have in dozens of countries, so you have people hearing survivor testimony, hearing that personal narrative. There was no personal narrative at the Nuremberg trials. You're also looking at a time when people aren't really thinking about the Holocaust anymore outside of Israel. Operation Paperclip has just ended, in which the United States has allowed Nazis and SS officials, brought them here to the United States to work in their space program. You have plenty of Nazi officials back in West Germany in the government. And the publicity of this trial and the personal, empathetic connections people made to the survivors' stories actually renewed interest in the fact that there were Nazis working in the government in West Germany, and renewed interest in holding criminals accountable for their actions of mass violence and genocide. And there were subsequent trials that took place in other countries afterwards. So I think it was such an important moment for this unique community of survivors or neighbors of survivors who had built something, who felt this weight. And then it was a reminder to the world that we can't allow people who have done such horrific crimes to continue on living. And so I think it had major ramifications.
And Simon Wiesenthal had closed his Nazi hunting office in 1952 because he thought no one was interested. And only after the Eichmann trial could he begin again and get support to track down all the Nazis that he did. And similarly, survivors found a new pride in telling their stories after the testimonies at the Eichmann trial.
Yeah, the way Israel was at the time was, it was a new state, relatively new state. So everything was about, the heroism, the building of the stage, and not the trauma. And I think that the Eichmann trial allowed the trauma to be spoken, which I think was really important.
And when did you know, and when did the public know what your father did? That his father's memoir is called Eichmann in My Hands. So when did they know the role that he played?
I think officially the story was told in 1977, which is almost 20 years after, after the capture, or 17 years after the capture. Obviously, Israel is a small country, so people know.
I mean, at school, did your friends know?
So I didn't know. I was 12 or 13. I remember that day very clearly. I came back home from school with two other kids. We used to walk for about a kilometer back home from school. And on the way home, they told me, your dad, he captured Eichmann. And I said, no, he did. Yes, they didn't know it. We argued. I thought that maybe they're not lying, but it was still annoying to me because I didn't know. And then I arrived home. Obviously, my father, who I thought as a kid was a clerk, but I know a clerk that's never at home, was not at home. So I asked my mother, Ima, I'm told that, kids, told me that Abba called Eichmann. I argued with them. What's the story? It said, talk to Abba this evening when he's back at home. And so he came back, and I asked him, and he didn't say yes, but he didn't deny it. So that's how I learned about it the first time when it was about 13 or so. So, many years after.
And, so his father went on to serve the Mossad and be on many, many missions for many years. Here's a little Easter egg. Rafi Eitan is played by Nick Kroll, actually a terrific performance by the comedian Nick Kroll. Nick Kroll's father, Jules Kroll, had an investigations company that Sri Malkin worked for. So that's kind of a little Easter egg. And Chris Weitz, who's the director, his father was known as a fashion designer, John Weitz, but in fact, John Weitz was a German Jew who served in the CIA tracking Nazis. So all the spycraft in the movie is from Chris Weitz sort of working out the things about what he did and didn't know about his father. And the other really funny thing that we were just talking about is there's a line at the end where he says, where Rafi Eitan says, only the tall people get remembered by history. Well, it's funny because Isser Harel is played by the guy from Fauda, Lior Raz, who you all know. Isser Harel might have been 4 feet tall, and Rafi Eitan might have been 4'1", if that. So it's kind of, they were all, and Ben Gurion, maybe not even 4 feet. So, that's all funny. But you would have a story about a day when you saw the two sides of your father when you were in New York. To tell that story.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I just wanted one thing to add. Not only I didn't know, my father's mother didn't know. He never told her anything. And the book that I have a copy of the book that my father was painting. You see him in the movie painting a little bit. That book, when he came back, he put it, hid it in his mother's apartment in Haifa, and took it only just a few days before she passed away, because they came to look for things in the apartment, and he told her only like the day she passed away that it was him. And it goes back to, as a matter of fact, it's a similar point. People didn't talk about the Holocaust, including Sida, my father, who captured Eichmann. Anyway, yeah, the story I think that you're talking about. So, my father was. Some of you maybe remember Colombo. My father was more. He was for sure not Roger Moore, right? So he was more like Colombo in many ways. He was like almost like a dual personality. On one hand, super focused, very creative, and on the other hand, when he was not on a mission, he would be the exact opposite, forgetful, just kind of like absent-minded. And I didn't see much of it. I mean, but when I grew up when I was in, my 20s and 30s, I started to see some of these things. And one of the stories that I remember very clearly, he was in New York. We were in New York together. We went to, can't remember why, deposits $3,000 in the bank in Manhattan. We went to 42nd Street, not too far from Times Square. I came with him. He came up with his Samsonite with cash, and we were waiting for the teller. We were sitting, I remember, on the table, and we're waiting for someone to take care of us. And as I'm waiting, and we're talking, and my father's, I don't know what, I see someone, like one of the bank employees, coming, taking the suitcase with the money and leaving the area. And I tell my dad, like, after 20 seconds, Abba, I think someone just took your money. And the guy looked like a bank employee, but he was not. And he was like, what do you mean? It's like, no, I don't know, the suitcase with the money is not here. And then, like, I saw the switch, from like the whatever, absent-minded to suddenly he's like, you could see it in his face. And then I remember he stood up and he told me, Acharai, after me, follow me, and started running. It's 42nd Street, New York City, one of the busiest streets, a Citibank. I remember really clearly. We go out 11 a.m., hundreds of people in the street and all that. I run after him outside. He goes outside. This was only like 60 seconds maybe after this thing happened. And he's looking for the guy. And the city, he can't see anything. There's like hundreds of people in the street. And then I see him leaning like all the way to the floor. I don't know what he's doing exactly, but I know now what he was doing because he told me he was looking because you can't see anything because there's so many people. But if you lean down and you look from the floor up, you can see the bottom of the suitcase much more easily than, a face, because there's only so many people that carry something with them. And he was looking left and right. And then it was the second time he told me, follow me. And I started running. And I ran after him and we went for like almost a block. And we found the guy. Well, we found. He found the guy. And we got next to him and he punched him in the face, took the suitcase, and then like very calmly said like, okay, we can go back. He went back all the way to the bank and deposited the money. I remember a bunch of stories similar to that, and what that happened.
Jordanna, do you have a question that you?
Yeah, actually, that's one of my favorite stories. I've been telling people this story, but I'm curious also about your father's relationship with his sister. And did he talk a lot about it when you were growing up?
He talked about it, but not a lot. When I mostly before he passed away, he talked more about these things. Before that, not so much. As a matter of fact, it's related to what to his mother. Um, I remember my father always used to say, the Holocaust is such, it's hard to grasp what 6 million people that were killed is, it, one story of one person is a bit easier. He talked about Fuma and the kids, but even with his mother, he didn't really talk about it. And the day, 2 days before he was sent to Argentina, before they left to Argentina, he he really wanted to, see, a bit more about who Fuma was, but he never talked to his mother about it because every time he started talking about it, it became a bit too heavy for him. Uh, so anyway, he went 2 days before they left to Argentina. He was good at disguising himself in general. So he, had a wig and disguised himself as an American that came to rent a room in her apartment, although she didn't plan to rent a room. But he knocked on the door and said, I hear you're renting rooms. I'm not renting a room. It's like, oh, and I don't know, your son, Zvika, told me that you're renting a room. So, okay, Zvika.
You understand, right? He's in disguise. He's in talking to his own mother, who doesn't recognize it.
Then recognizing, and he said, like, oh, Zvika is always doing these stupid things. But sit down, I'll give you some food in the meantime. Good Jewish mother. And while she went to, prepare the food, he had a few minutes to quietly, without anyone, near him, watching the pictures of Fuma, under the mirror, under the glass, on the window and all that, and talk to her about Fuma as this American guy that came to, rent a thing. At the end, he also told with him and all that. And he wanted that as part of he wanted a bit more of that before leaving to Argentina.
And one of the things that really doesn't come out fully in the movie is that he was an incredible artist, sketcher. And he sketched all the time, really. And he sketched Eichmann a lot. I mean, a lot in those scenes where he's sitting there, he's sketching him, and you brought a copy, not the original, of some of his sketches. So yeah, it just show. I mean, you can't see it, but just show them a little bit.
Yeah. So this is the book. Like my father bought this book, the Argentina Journal, when he arrived to Argentina. I don't know. I go to therapy. I don't know. Elon Musk take ketamine. That was his therapy. To paint, to write things, and it's really interesting because it's both painting, sketches, writing things, and it's not just about the operation. He writes about Fuma here, about her kids, about Eichmann, Hitler, the cat that made him, afraid of getting back to the apartment with his being, would didn't love cats, and things like that. So it's a lot of like his thinking. It's almost like he's a replica of his brain here. And I also remember him as a kid when I came home. That was his way to relax. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I would come back home, or I would see he would always paint or sculptures and all that. He was very creative. He just and his creativity was mainly used in his life as a Mossad agent.
Tell the Topol story.
In New York. Yeah, yeah. So Chaim Topol, who's was another on the roof. He's on the roof. Famous actor. My father and Chaim and the family were really close friends. Coincidentally, Chaim also played my father in in the House on Girls of Garibaldi. So anyway, one day they were in New York together, going for dinner. They left dinner. They see two guys getting close to them. One of them with a knife, putting the knife on my father's cheek and telling him, the money of your life or something like that. And my father kind of like says, okay, I'll give you my money. Punches him. He's not always punching, but this is the second story that I do. But punches him. The guy goes all the way into the window of the store behind, breaks the window, and falls in. The other guy runs away. There were two. The other guy runs away, and then my father looks at Chaim and says, "Okay, let's go." And then kind of a follow me, yeah, follow me too. And they go into a taxi, and that part I know from Chaim. A lot of these things I know, by the way, about my father are not from my father. A lot of them I know from the Shiva, because then suddenly all of his friends from the Mossad were telling me things, and some of it from him towards the very end, basically. Anyway, they go into a taxi to, I don't know, this and this hotel. They leave the taxi, they go into the hotel from the front door, and Chaim just runs after my father. They leave from the back door of the hotel. They take another taxi to another hotel, front door, back door, three of these guys. I remember Chaim telling me, is it a movie we're doing now? Because Chaim, we used to do it as an actor, but not in real life. Anyway, they're doing it for 15 minutes in and out of taxis and hotel lobbies and all that. And then the last taxi they take and they go, they ask the driver, they give them the address of where they left. And they go by and they see it, police and ambulance and all that. And then I think my father tells Chaim, okay, mission accomplished. We could go back for a drink now. And so I have a lot of stories like that.
And actually, Chaim Topol actually did do some missions for the Mossad.
Yeah.
And I think at least one with your father. Yeah. So yeah, they work together.
They work together.
We're gonna open it up now to questions. This is my pet peeve. Questions only, no speeches. If you knew a tailor who made a suit for his father, whose brother knew his wife, afterwards, we can come and talk to him afterwards. Now, questions, please.
Was there a 10-day delay?
Was there a 10-day delay?
Oh, before going back, before leaving, it took about 10 days. The drama is not exactly accurate in the movie, but it did. I would say one more thing. My father actually made him sign the papers, but it wasn't a prerequisite. It would bring you to Israel even without the papers. I mean, they already took him off the street without permission. So the papers were not that, but they wanted him to sign it because it would look it was a better idea to bring him after he signed it, and it was 10 days.
And getting him on the plane was not difficult. They took him in with the service car. Yeah.
Yeah, they did say that he was dropped and that all stories was true, but it worked really well. And I've heard rumors like part of the reason they stayed a little bit was they thought they could also get Mangala.
Yeah.
Who is also
Also began the death. My father, after years later, not as a Mossad agent, was also working on trying to get Mengele. And only later on they found out that Mengele.
And the story was that Mengele was in Argentina. You see those scenes where Eichmann is talking to crowds? So Mengele is at one of those things. And Mengele says, Eichmann's talking too much. And that's because of Eichmann, Mengele went to Brazil. And Mengele eventually died in Brazil in what they say is a swimming accident. I would like to believe it was no accident, but that is the great belief that it was an accident. Any other questions? Yes.
Was the deal for the light to come part of the deal? And sorry, Ray, my brain is shut down with what you just said. Sorry. I'm gonna come back again part of this watch. Okay.
The what?
Yes.
The question was it accurate that the wife was part of the deal with Eichmann?
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah, for my father, I know that's accurate. And my father kind of broke the rules a little bit. Tzvi Aharoni, the investigator there, this is, as a matter of fact, accurate. Tzvi Aharoni was very much by the book. My father was, that was the only book. Yeah, there's no book really. And my father was, was there talking to him and all that, made him sign, and yes, said that he said it, and then he made sure that it happened. He also promised him that he'll come to the trial when he's there, which is also something.
And they had eye contact at the and they did eye contact at the trial.
I forgot the other property. Carlos was based on who? The character who was whipping up the local food or whatever.
So I don't know exactly who Carlos was based on. However, there's a wonderful historical book called Eichmann Before Jerusalem that's written about his time in Argentina. And there was a whole crowd of Nazi sympathizing Argentinians, journalists, people involved in the Perón government, and Germans who were in Argentina, who were part of this crowd that Eichmann thought he could be a big shot to. Yes, back there.
What happened to his son and his wife? Eichmann's son.
What happened to Eichmann's son and his wife? His son Klaus, the one you see there, remained a person who was a figure in neo-Nazi movements. The rest of the family took a very low profile.
Yeah, one of them is in Germany, I believe, and is in one of the universities. I know it because there was a time a few years ago where they wanted us to meet and do something together, which I was open to do, and just ended up on that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the film, Eichen is portrayed as, taking the personal information that your father shared to it, and then using it to manipulate your father into trying to get him to kill him, essentially, or to help him kill himself, I suppose. Is any of that true?
I don't remember. I do know that my father talked to Eichmann about his family, Eichmann's family, and about my father's family. I do know that this happened. I know that from my father. I remember very clear that my father always, even when he painted him in the book, he said, I don't know, he's a monster, but when I paint him, I end up painting someone who's just looks like a regular guy. I don't know how to paint a monster. And it's just, this is what I end up having in this book. Sorry, your question was, oh yeah. So I don't know, I don't remember from my father the story about manipulations. I remember him trying to make Eichmann feel a little bit more like a regular person so that, things can happen a bit more smoothly.
Eichmann was known to be sort of a master interrogator. Yeah. But he was also a sort of congenital liar. So he would say, and we see this in the movie, whatever suited him at the moment. Without power, he probably would not act so powerful. And when you read Hannah Arendt, Eichmann in Jerusalem, you read the story, I believe, of someone who fell for the imposture that Eichmann gave in Jerusalem of being this little Wiener person.
Yeah, I think the portrayal of him being a manipulator, I think, is true for him as a person, not necessarily that he's manipulating the Mossad agents, but to speak to him as his character, because he was a manipulator.
Right. Anyone? Yes.
So, when these are, I'm guessing, are Hollywood additions, like Eichmann making the guy and drawing the picture of him that led to them looking to this guy, seeing him outside of the first time that he was taking notes outside the house, and Eichmann were drawing the sunbound drawing. I'm assuming that was added, and the character who traded the dollars and the black market, he led them back. I'm assuming those were things were added in from the Shuri.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, the school, was it Sylvia who he was dating this?
Yes. That's a true story.
Story.
And there's a great documentary. There are two great documentaries about Fritz Bauer, the West German prosecutor who actually found Eichmann in Argentina. And it took several years between when Fritz Bauer found Eichmann and Israel decided to act upon it.
But yet, the story is true. He was a Holocaust survivor who went blind because of violence, because he was Jewish in Germany, and moved to Argentina because of his trauma, never got married to a woman in Argentina, never told his family he was Jewish until his daughter came home and said, I met this guy who's also from Germany, et cetera, et cetera. And so,
Would she say that?
yeah, and I believe the Israeli government actually ultimately gave them a reward money in the end for some of their actions later on. Not that I think that's why they did it, but it was that's the moment.
Last question. Go ahead.
The girl that they were torturing, did she die or did she get released?
I think that part is an embellishment. When Eichmann didn't return home, his family was alerted, and his son did alert the neo-Nazi movements or the Nazi movements there. But the dramatization of them, like almost catching them, is
Pulling all this or going out the back door. Now, I do want to let you know that for the next 4 Thursdays, we'll be showing next week The Pawnbroker, a Sidney Lumet film with Rod Steiger. The week after, we have Enemies, a Love Story, based on an Isaac Bashevis Singer story, directed by Paul Mazursky, with Angelica Houston and Ron Silver. Then we're showing the documentary about Jewish lives after the end of the Holocaust called The Long Way Home. And then we're going to end with Sophie's Choice, which I haven't seen since it came out. So that should all be interesting. Thank you so much for coming.